Good morning, everybody. Welcome to some Civil War poetry. It is approximately 7:30 in the morning Central Standard Time as I'm coming at you from Minneapolis, Minnesota from my office. My name is Vincent Hannum and I'm just excited to spend each morning talking a little bit of history, a little bit of current events, history as it relates to the Civil War, and reading some poetry ultimately and learning a little bit about poets. I have learned a lot. I've never read so much poetry as I have these past couple weeks, which has been fantastic. Learning about new poets, especially. Um, my weekend was great. I went to a bookstore to try to gather more text. Um, One thing I stumbled upon in my research, my deliberate research, I stumbled upon a collection of African American poetry from the Civil War, which, as I've mentioned a couple times on the show, that's exactly what I've been wanting to do and to feature. That collection, as far as I know, is only published online at the moment. Cambridge Press. It's a really long title, but it's essentially a collection of poetry that was published in a couple newspapers in New York City at the time. One of which called the Anglo-African Herald Chronicle, and it's just like dozens and dozens and dozens of poetry of African Americans. So I am already spinning the wheels to just have a big old recording session with a couple of friends where we read and discuss, and then maybe divvy those up into different segments. Maybe that's what season two will feature coming up here next month or so. So yeah, lots of cool, exciting things coming down the pike. Mischief Tales itself has a lot of cool things coming. If you wanted to check out my sister uh, channel, that will probably end up producing future some Civil War poetries. So check them out if you haven't already. You'll probably find this there again in the future. So today in U.S. Civil War history seems to be a rather quiet day. In 1864, Confederate General John Bell Hood unsuccessfully attacked William T. Sherman at Peachtree Creek. Not sure where Peachtree Creek is. Oh, yes, I do. Okay, this was the Atlanta campaign, and that I know that because of our quote from General Sherman. Quote, Atlanta is ours and fairly won. And he wrote that in a telegraph to President Lincoln. As I mentioned before, Lincoln was in the midst of a really hard campaign in 1864. If he were to lose, then the presumed president, George B. McClellan, would probably have sued for peace with the Confederacy, thus ending not only the United States, but any hope for emancipation for all those slaves. And you can kiss any sort of civil rights goodbye. So, yeah, the stakes were as big as they could be. But on the battlefield, General Sherman captured the city of Atlanta, and that boosted morale so much. Like, suddenly citizens of the North were like, whoa, okay, suddenly we can do this. And it was right before election day, and that just propelled Lincoln to the top, securing the victory, securing the literal victory of the United States over the evils of slavery. So again, not to be too dramatic there, but it was a big deal. um, so we'll move into some poetry now, and I start off every segment just by saying the book is Poetry of the Civil War. It's just an anthology of about 60 something poems, and I'll read two each day, one from the Union side, one from the Confederate side, just to try to glean a little bit about how folks were feeling at the time, at least poetically, about, again, something that cannot be paralleled in its in its drama, in its dramaticism. Uh, so yeah, the first poem is by a fella named Author Unknown. So there will be no bio today read for Author Unknown, but the poem itself is called Missing. Links down below to the poem itself if you would like to follow along. In the cool, sweet hush of a wooded nook, where the May buds sprinkle the green old mound, and the winds and the birds and the limpid brook murmur their dreams with a drowsy sound. Who lies so still in the plushy moss, with his pale cheek pressed on a breezy pillow, couched where the light and the shadows cross through the flickering fringe of the willow? Who lies, alas, so still, so chill in the whispering grass? A soldier clad in the zouave dress, a bright-haired man with his lips apart, one hand thrown up over his frank dead face, and the other clutching his pulseless heart, lies here in the shadows, cool and dim, his musket swept by a trailing bough, with a careless grace in each quiet limb, and a wound on his manly brow, a wound, alas, whence the warm blood drips on the quiet grass. The violets peer from their dusky beds with a tearful dew in their great pure eyes. The lilies quiver their shining heads, their pale lips full of a sad surprise. And the lizard darts through the glistening fern, and the squirrel rustles the branches hoary. Strange birds fly out with a cry to bathe their wings in the sunset glory, while the shadows pass over the quiet face and the dewy grass. God pity the bride who waits at home, with her lily cheeks and her violet eyes, dreaming the sweet old dreams of love, while her lover is walking in paradise. God strengthen her heart as the days go by, and the long drear nights of her vigil follow. Nor bird, nor moon, nor whispering wind may breathe the tale of the hollow. Alas, alas, the secret is safe with the woodland grass. That was called Missing by Anonymous. Um, Pretty dark, pretty sad. A lot of the northern poems have absolutely hit on that tone. A lot of the Confederate poems have just been pure rah rah. And I don't know. My personal taste is I kind of like a little bit of depth and poignancy in my poetry. So we'll see what our Confederate poet has for us today. Her name is Carolyn A. Ball, and she has written a piece called The Jacket of Gray. And let me just read her bio for you here so we can maybe learn a little bit about her point of view. Oh, very short. Carolyn A. Ball, N-E, Nay, I never know how to pronounce that, Rutledge, so her maiden name is Rutledge, was born in Charleston, South Carolina in 1825. A slim volume of her verse, The Jacket of Gray and Other Fugitive Poems, was published in 1866. That's all we got. So if you know any more about Carolyn A. Ball, do comment below, and we'll just learn from each other. Anyways, her poem is called aptly The Jacket of Gray. Fold it up carefully, lay it aside, tenderly touch it, look on it with pride. For dear to our hearts must it be evermore, the jacket of gray our loved soldier boy wore. Can we ever forget when he joined the brave band that rose in defense of our dear southern land, and in his bright youth hurried on to the fray, how proudly he donned it, the jacket of gray. His fond mother blessed him and looked up above, commending to heaven the child of her love. What anguish was hers, mortal tongue cannot say, when he passed from her sight in the jacket of gray. But her country had called, and she would not repine, though costly the sacrifice placed on its shrine. Her heart's dearest hopes on its altar she lay, when she sent out her boy in the jacket of gray. Months passed, and war's thunder rolled over the land. Unsheathed was the sword and lighted the brand. We heard in the distance the sound of the fray, and prayed for our boy in the jacket of gray. Vain, all in vain were our prayers and our tears. The glad shout of victory rang in our ears. But our treasured one on the red battlefield lay, where the lifeblood oozed out on the jacket of gray. His young comrades found him and tenderly bore the cold, lifeless form to his home by the shore. Oh, dark were our hearts on that terrible day when we saw our dead boy in the jacket of gray. Spotted and tattered and stained now with gore was the garment which once he so proudly wore. We bitterly wept as we took it away and replaced with death's white robe the jacket of gray. We laid him to rest in his cold, narrow bed, and graved on the marble we placed o'er his head. As the proudest tribute our sad hearts could pay, he never disgraced it, the jacket of gray. Then fold it up carefully, lay it aside, tenderly touch it, look on it with pride. For dear must it be to our hearts evermore, the jacket of gray our loved soldier boy wore. The Jacket of Gray by Carolyn A. Ball. Um, yeah, that was simple and nice, not too dramatic, not too complicated or flowery in its language or tone. Just simply something that, quite honestly, I think is universal to any army everywhere. Mother sending her boy off to war, looking crisp in his uniform, and his lifeblood is dripping out all over the place. So, no disrespect. Yeah. All right. So tomorrow, I'll just give you a little sneak peek. We have friend of the pod, Walt Whitman, ladies and gentlemen, good friend of the pod. Check out his Leaves of Grass. I bought that this weekend. Another thing I did. Hope you had an equally great weekend. Walt Whitman and his poem Cavalry Crossing a Ford. Then for the southern side, we will be reading a poem from Julia L. Keyes called Only One Killed. So there you go. Book is Poetry of the Civil War. My name is Vincent Hannum. Like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. If you or any of your friends like poetry, Civil War, or waking up early. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care.